Welcome back to the Mindful Mic. Today, we're sharing a powerful conversation about resilience, healing, and the strength that comes when a community flocks together.
We're joined by two incredible women, Leslie Scantling, a breast cancer survivor and founder of Flock Cancer Idaho, and Carrie Panzer Epley, a licensed social worker who specializes in cancer support and therapy.
Together, they share what it means to walk through life-changing diagnosis, navigate the emotional side of survivorship, and turn pain into purpose.
This episode touches on topics of cancer and grief. Please listen with care, and remember, if you or someone you love is struggling, you're not alone. Okay, hello everybody. We are so excited to be here with Leslie and Carrie. Thank you, ladies, for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Good. So let's start. Leslie, let's pass it off to you first, and just give some description of, who you are, why you're here with us today, and we're going to just have at it.
Sure. I'm Leslie Scantling. I'm a longtime Idahoan, and we've known each other for a long time. And I am here because I am a breast cancer survivor and have recently taken that journey and have founded a local breast cancer nonprofit and have been working with the survivor community locally.
And what's that nonprofit?
It is called Flock Cancer Idaho, and we are in our sixth year, into our sixth year. Yes.
Then that's down. I see the pink flamingos down on
down in the north end on
end,
Harrison Boulevard
everywhere.
is where we have our big annual event. But we also work with women all through the valley, and even kind of regionally, and work with some events that are in other areas. Like there's an event coming up in McCall, and events out in the rural community. We try to help everybody.
Amazing. And we definitely want to learn more about Flock Cancer Idaho and how that was started and what you all do for the nonprofit. But maybe first, if you could tell us how you know Carrie, and Carrie, maybe give a little introduction to yourself as well.
Well, I was connected with Carrie through your wonderful organization, and we found out that we have so much to talk about when it comes to, survivorship and the grief and the complex emotions and mental health related to it. So I'll hand it over to my new friend Carrie to introduce herself.
Thanks, Leslie. My name is Carrie Panzer, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I specialize in oncology. So my story goes back a bit. I am not a survivor, but I have worked with oncology patients, their family members, and their caregivers going on 20 years. So next year will mark 20 years in this field. Wow. And I came into this work. I am from Northern California growing up and wanted a big change and moved to New York, actually, to get my master's. And that was 20 years ago. And I was lucky enough to get an internship at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center during my master's program, and then went on to get hired. And it was such a wonderful experience. Literally taught me lifelong lessons that we'll talk about today. And I've remained in oncology ever since. And when I moved to Idaho in 2014, I was with St. Luke's, and I've carried on working with oncology, the community basically, since that experience at Memorial Sloan Kettering. So I now have a private practice here in Boise where I provide mental health counseling and also workshops and even group work. So it's been really fun to get to know Leslie. And like she said, the minute we just met through connecting through this podcast, we've realized we have so much to talk about, and we're going to dig into that today.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So, and I'm Carrie. I'm so excited to have you. I've known Carrie for also a long time. So thank you for coming here and sharing your insight. So I love how you guys are brought together, right? It's totally two different sides, but so much in common and so much understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Leslie, let's get into kind of the unfun but the important stuff, right?
Yeah.
Let's get in, if you're comfortable, talking about your diagnosis.
Absolutely.
And kind of when that happened, and just kind of walk us through that a little bit, if you're okay with that.
For sure. I was introduced to the breast cancer community when my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1999. And, we just stayed really cognizant of it, and Mom got involved in, the Komen Race for the Cure thing. And we also discussed that we have a pretty significant family history. And not everybody has a family history. A lot of people, as a matter of fact, tend not to get screened because they say they don't have a family history. But family history always starts somewhere, right? But I am actually a fourth generation breast cancer survivor.
Oh, wow.
So I was always pretty vigilant about doing my screens, getting my annual mammograms. And I think from my perspective, I kind of considered probably wasn't a matter of if, it was probably when.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't make it any less impactful when I was diagnosed in 2016. And I had 2 types of breast cancer, invasive and ductal carcinoma. I was stage 2. And, just started my journey. And at that time, my mom and I were both pretty involved in the Komen Foundation. Through my journey, I ended up having 6 surgeries, and I did 3 months of radiation treatment, and then went through about 5 to 6 years of oral chemotherapy, a drug called anastrozole. And here I am. It's been 9 years now. And I'm cancer-free.
So did you find out, you found out through a mammogram?
I
mean,
did.
you were obviously, like
I
you
did.
said, you're already very much aware that it ran in your family.
Yes, just my
Did you
annual
have a
screening.
concern? It was just your annual, so
Just
it wasn't
my
like a
annual
concern.
screening. Just my,
Wow.
rudimentary, the annual screening that everybody needs to do.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
just 1 year, it's crazy that just in 1 year you went from
No
nothing
cancer.
to no cancer to stage 2.
Right.
And I was just telling you before that, I just got my mammogram. Get it every year, how important it is.
Yeah.
And it's so quick, it's so easy.
Right.
And I highly am a huge supporter of that.
Yeah.
I also think
And
that
the technology is getting better.
getting
And it's
better.
getting easier.
Yeah.
We try to remove all the barriers.
Right.
But also we're seeing breast cancer rates much greater in
Right.
women under 50.
Yes.
So, like, if anybody has a concern, even if they're younger than the advocated age, because I do think it still hovers around 40, that they say annual screening should start at 40. But if anybody has concerns, they need to go advocate for themselves for sure.
Or if it does run in the family. And I also say on the advocate, when I got my results back, I had no idea what it meant. It was like, check your portal, and then I get to it, and it says all this stuff. I don't see a negative. I don't see a positive. It just says, and I had to call to ask for it.
Yeah.
So just being an advocate and being like, what exactly does this mean?
Yeah. Well, and you need to have a baseline, even for women if they're childbearing, have a baseline before you start breastfeeding, have another baseline after. There's just it's good information to have in your record, historic.
So in that moment when you found out about the diagnosis, can you explain a little bit about the things that you were feeling and how you were able to move forward to fight this journey, and sort of how maybe that led to the creation of Flock Cancer?
Oh, it's a spiral. I'm not going to lie. In that moment, there's so much fear and there's so much that goes through it. Women, we're natural caregivers. And oftentimes our first thought is, like, how are we going to get other people through our diagnosis? We have to go on like this announcement tour. How do we tell people? How do I tell my kids? Like, oh, I can't do that over the phone. There's this really, really awkward phase of like, how do I tell other people? But then when you're first diagnosed, you end up with more questions than answers. And you have to go through a lot more tests and try to figure out, where exactly is it? What exactly is it? What's the path? And then you also immediately have 5 doctors. And I'm a project manager by trade, and I'm like, I need to know how all these people are talking to each other. How is this going to, because everybody has a little bit of a different aspect. So, I went through all of that, and it's a very complex PTSD event. And granted, a lot of this I have learned now years down the road, because right at that point, there's a certain part of your brain that just starts to kind of live in this painful, stressful shadow, because there's a lot of what if scenarios you take yourself through. You're like, what if I lose my hair? Oh, it's okay if I lose my hair. It's just hair. But I don't want to lose my hair.
Right.
Okay. How many surgeries am I going to have? Okay, well, what if it's not good enough? There's just a lot of spirals.
A lot of banter with yourself, right?
Yes, yeah.
And so from there, though, I mean, you talk about all these doctors. When do
Yeah.
you find out that one of those doctors needs to be an LCSW, needs somebody over here that, like, is that something that because, Grace is bringing in the mental, aspect of it.
Yeah.
the physical, right? But talking about what's going on in your head, and is it something that you're like, I need to start talking to someone, or is that later on, or?
You know, it would be really interesting to hear Carrie's past experience about when she gets involved with a new diagnosee, because my experience, you know, right now has been so much in survivorship and helping women detangle it after they're through the treatment phase, and we're at the, oh my gosh, what just happened? How do I put myself together phase? So I didn't have the benefit of working with a mental health specialist early on. And I guess part of me is thinking like, oh, would that be too early? Because you're just so, you're just so focused on, you know, this surgery and this treatment. And it is very, very much like in the heat of the battle versus how do I deal with PTSD after the fact? What's your experience, Carrie?
Right. No, such a good point. I really hear from people at all different points, I would say, in their experience. So if I'm hearing from somebody that's newly diagnosed, usually they've gotten my name from, say, their breast surgeon or one of the breast care navigators, say at St. Luke's or St. Al's.
We love those people.
Everybody,
we
yes,
love those people.
Huge fans of the breast care navigators. So for some people, right at diagnosis, it is helpful to connect with a mental health counselor. Some people are reaching out and they're like, I have surgery in 2 weeks and I really need to process what's coming and figure out like exactly what you're saying, Leslie. I have to make sure that I'm communicating with my, you know, loved ones. Is it my adult children? Am I flying to go see them? Whatever that is, because it is very personal, right? How you want to communicate the diagnosis and what you know to be true at that moment, right? What are the doctors telling me? How do I communicate that to my loved ones, but with boundaries so that everybody, you know, isn't going into a fear spiral, maybe themselves, but often people do because they love, you know, the individual so much. And really, I think in that initial phase is understanding what is going to be grounding for that individual. What are some grounding exercises or tools that I can teach, you know, somebody coming to me to help calibrate their nervous system? Because like you said, it is fear. You're in a spiral. And there's a very wise psychiatrist at the St. Luke's Cancer Institute here in town who said diagnosis is like fight or flight on steroids. And so you are in that panic mode. And so what I'm trying to do is help people calibrate their nervous system, get grounded, so then they can move forward into what's next.
Yeah.
Then there's the period of during treatment, and we can talk more about that. And then survivorship is a whole other, you know, journey.
And it's the overlooked part of the journey. That was what was really important to me. Someone said survivorship is the longest part of the journey, and it's kind of the most underserved part of it, because everybody, you do get a lot of kind of support in community. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, you're having surgery, or, you know, how's treatment and all that. And then after that, you feel a little kind of forgotten about, kind of dropped. And it's cancer itself is very isolating. And survivorship especially can be
isolating.
Yeah.
That's such a good point. You know, I remember back when I was in New York at Memorial Sloan Kettering. It was great. We were encouraged to start support groups and other programs. And so I was digging a lot into the research at that time. And it was called out that, you know, as people are surviving longer and longer, right? So if more people are being diagnosed young, they have a way greater proportion of their life in which they're living as a survivor. And we haven't caught up across the country in terms of survivorship programming. I think a lot of large, big city health systems have that, but there isn't always the resources. And so that's why it's wonderful, like Flock Cancer is available, because survivorship, you know, here I am. I'm going to live the rest of my life now in the body I have and with this experience and this trauma.
Yeah.
And what do I need to thrive in that or do the best I can?
Yeah.
And you mentioned a couple of things, grief and trauma that comes with survivorship. Can you explain a little bit more about the challenges that arise, you know, after treatment ends, after you've survived this battle? What does that mean to you, survivorship?
Well, the grief and trauma, those are pretty intertwined for me. And what comes to mind that I try to talk to other newly diagnosed survivors, like coming into our, you know, I say it's, you know, the saddest sisterhood with the best members, is being diagnosed with cancer is a significant PTSD event. but it really takes you a while to kind of detangle what did that all mean and who am I now? Because you're dealing with emotional scars, you're dealing with physical scars, and those are very, very, very personal and very significant. And a lot of women don't really, I try not to, go to these women who are newly diagnosed and go, well, nothing's ever really going to be the same again. But the hard truth is you're not going to be the same. I'm 9 years out and I still have significant brain fog. I find I have to write things down. And that's stress and that's trauma. But it was also the physical aspects of my treatment and, multiple surgeries. But the trauma is very complex because, and it's different for everybody. There's survivor guilt. And there's also, we've talked a lot about this body image. Women, we already have a very complex relationship with our bodies. Yeah.
Yes.
And when we're dealing with other people who are interacting with us when we're going through our cancer journey, they just want us to be okay. And so there's a lot of people who will look at you and go, oh, good, you're done. Oh, that's in the past. Whereas once we start to get on our feet again, we're just barely able to mentally try to figure out what in the heck just happened. Yeah. And I saw it a little bit with my mother after she went through everything, and then she got like her eyes done a little bit, and it was very atypical for my mother because she's not, she was never like vainglorious or anything, and I didn't understand until I went through my own journey, because people look at you that you're like, oh, I totally forget you had that cancer thing or anything, because they don't see I have 3 linear feet of scars that nobody else has to see, but I see them every day, and I feel them, and so a lot of things just aren't quite the same.
I've heard people say, once you're part of the cancer community, right? Nobody else can understand. You're part of a community, and you're part of that community forever. Because you talk about the PTSD, probably the fear of it coming back, right? You have to do your checks.
Oh yeah.
I thought it was really interesting that you said survivor's guilt, because I have not heard of that when it comes to cancer, but that makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
And so I just, just looking at all of those and all of those aspects and stuff, it's just kind of, like I said, part of this community. And then we forget that, right? So I think it's like the groups that Carrie provides, the survivor groups, also the people of loved ones that have had cancer is a whole nother, right, group.
Absolutely.
Right.
And PTSD that they must go through as well. And so I think it's interesting that, yeah, you're right, people forget. It's like when you lose somebody close to you, and everyone brings you the casseroles and come, oh, I'm so sorry, and then they forget, and life goes on, as it does.
Yeah.
But you are always part of that survivors in the cancer community.
Yeah.
Having those feelings.
Very
and that's why I
much
think
so.
it's very important here with Carrie, to...
Well, what I loved about when Carrie and I first had a conversation is that one of the elements that she talks so much about is grief.
Right.
And there's a lot of grief that goes along with cancer, just because, as I said, like nothing is quite ever the same. And again, my experience is very my own. I'm a deep empath. Not everybody that goes through cancer is an empath. I think it's a little harder for us, but
I am too,
Yeah.
Leslie. I'm a huge empath and
Yeah.
highly sensitive person. So
Yeah.
it adds to the experience, I guess. But
That's probably why you're doing what you're doing, though, Carrie.
right, yeah, it's true. Yes, that led me to, I think,
you
to the
are.
field. It makes me hopefully good at what I do. But
Yeah.
I know the guilt, well, there is guilt. There is, I think, in many ways. But the grief is what I wanted to talk about, because I really appreciate what you were just saying, Leslie, is that so many people will say to me, whether it's, one-to-one in counseling or in a group setting, is I just want to go back to what was. Or they'll say, I just want to go back to normal.
yeah.
And what it is a yearning for that what was before, right? And so
Yeah.
we are often grieving. I think with any big life change, whether it's a cancer diagnosis or another kind of loss, we have to grieve what was, because life is different. And a lot of people will say to me, and please chime in, but they hate the term new normal. That people will say, well, it's your new normal now. And people will say, I never want to hear that again. So we'll laugh and say, well, what would you like to hear instead? But I think there's there's something in that of like, it is often, there is a new normal. And so you're needing to grieve what was. And so for some people, counseling or groups or getting together in community is how they do go through that grieving process and give voice to what has changed, what's been lost, what's different, both for them, but maybe for their family members, their kids, you know.
And it's been important. One of the reasons creating Flock Cancer was so important to me is to tell survivors that they have a community.
Right.
You know, I'm often asked, you know, what would you say to a newly diagnosed woman who's coming into this? And I would just say, please, you know, rely on your community, because we do have a lot of empathetic, supportive people in our lives, but the women who have walked it, you know, you need a safe place to fall apart sometimes. Yeah. And, you know, we can kind of sit there in that muck and that suck with you and like go, right, gonna have some yucky, but I'm living proof to say you can like get up and you can put that smile back on and you can go, but still give it space, right, and really be there.
Right. I would say it's the same message, but as you are not alone, you know, for somebody like you are not alone. There is so much support here, and whether that's one-to-one counseling or in community. I have a client, and I love this description, who said, when you're diagnosed, if you imagine a step stool, right, with the 4 legs to it to stay balanced and something that you can be steady on, it can feel like those 4 legs have been kicked out from under your stool, for example. And so really figuring out how to lean on the legs of that stool. And if you think of it as like one leg of the stool is your medical team, right? The other is going to be, say, friends and family. The other is going to be community. And then I would say fourth is just really grounding, you know, nutrition, health,
your own mental health.
Your own mental health. But your medical team is going to support you, but they're really kind of telling you what to do. Like, here's the treatment course. Here's what you're going to say. Friends and family are going to do the best they can to support you with the knowledge they have. You were hinting at this earlier. But community is where you're going to be with people that really understand what you're talking about, where you can be vulnerable, where you can fall apart. And they're going to validate you and not try to talk you out of what you're feeling to make you feel better. And then your fourth leg is your own self. You're taking care of yourself and as best you can in your body and your mental health to stay steady. So I like that visual as a grounding, kind of a grounding visual, if you will.
Yeah, and is the community aspect of that visual, is that the driving factor behind creating Flock Cancer?
For me, it was a community because, you know, when my mother was going through her cancer journey and the Komen organization existed, my mom is known as the Fun Barbara. And so she would just say, you know, once a year, we're just going to do this walk and it's going to be a lot of fun. And, you know, we're going to throw a cocktail party the night before. Then we would drive to the Komen event and we would, I'm not even kidding, tailgate and then go walk for cancer. And I'm like, you know what, Mom, you went through that. You know, we get to do whatever you want on this day. You know, this is Fun Barbara Day.
And I just
kind of a celebrate. I feel like it is a day of celebration. Everyone's in their pink tutus and
that
is so fantastic about your mom. I love that image of her.
So when there was going to be no Komen event, my first reach into that was, oh, can we still have our party? Oh, okay. Well, we'll have a party, but maybe we'll just still take just a little symbolic walk. I'm like, well, my mom would probably still like a shirt. She loves to, you know. And I just kind of did some of these baby steps. And the next thing I knew, I'm like, well, I'll put it on a community calendar. And then a local survivor group said, well, we miss that there's not something here too. Can we come walk with you? I'm like, sure. And, you know, then I'm like, well, the shirts could be a little fundraiser. It was all these small organic steps. And the next thing I knew, like 350 people showed up. And I raised $25,000.
This is the first.
This was the first year.
The first one.
Yeah. And I ended up at the end of that day, like covered in like tears and glitter. And I'm like, what has just happened? Because everybody said same time next year.
They were asking for it. They're, you know.
Yeah.
They needed it and wanted you provided
and it really showed me how important that need is
Yeah.
in the survivor community, that we get that opportunity once a year just to go back to that space and go, you know what? I do get a day where I get to wave my own flag or wear a shirt with my own picture on it and
Right.
say, I did the hard thing. And so
I
to
love
be able to still mark the occasion.
on Mother's
And
Day, right?
Yeah,
It's always Mother's Day
always
weekend.
Mother's Day weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we walk along the boulevard in the North End, and it's just gotten to be bigger and pinker. But the feedback from the survivor community, I'll never forget. I think it was my second year. There was a woman standing next to, and all the survivors get to wear a sash that states that they're survivors. She was near the survivor booth, and she looked very, maybe a little stricken and a little forlorn. And I just went up to her, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm Leslie. I'm, the founder." I'm like, "Are you okay?" She said, "This is the first time in 2 years that I haven't felt alone."
Oh, wow.
And that's the moment I go back to.
Makes it worth it right there.
Absolutely. It
Yep.
really, really does. Because, I don't want to get so caught up in, the organization of creating a nonprofit from the mission of supporting survivors in their continuing journey and finding out what the community and survivors and families and programs need, and to be able to fill that.
Can I also chime in?
Yes.
I do know individuals that have lost a loved one, so a mom or grandmother, to breast cancer, and they go, they go every year. And for them,
Yeah.
it is such a meaningful gathering.
Yeah.
And again, they feel like they can celebrate their loved one
Wear
and
their
be in that
name,
community.
right?
Wear their name. It could be a photo. And they look forward. I mean, they're planning for months. They're so excited
Yeah.
for this walk and this community gathering. So I thank you for that too, Leslie. I mean, it's a chance to get out there and grieve, but in a celebratory way, in an
Yeah.
honorary
To
way.
give it space.
Yes, give it space.
Absolutely.
That's
to give
something
it
you've
space.
talked about a lot, is
Yeah.
giving it space.
Mhm.
Yeah. When it comes to
It
cancer.
allowed me to embrace my survivor journey. When I was going through my own breast cancer journey, I was in a non-supportive relationship, is a very subtle way to put it. And I was not able to kind of embrace my survivorship. And so not being in that relationship has taught me a couple things. First of all, I'm very cognizant and aware of other women, and I try to always tap in to make sure that they have a supportive partner through this. But also, and my train of thought just left the station, also to be able to embrace that survivorship because I wasn't able to before. And I just get to kind of be the hero in my own story and go, this is part of who I am. And if I'm going to live pink forward a little bit in that, I'm going to lean into it because, by gosh, I deserve it.
And also, kind of what you were saying is, if you don't have that supportive, quote, life partner, who are going to be your
Right.
people, right? Who are going to be those supports? And
Yeah.
I love talking with individuals about that. Is who are going to be your people?
Yeah.
We take it for granted, maybe. I think sometimes we take for granted that everybody has a significant other or family and all that, but not everybody does.
No.
Or some people live here by themselves and
Right.
their family's far away. So I think that's a really good point.
It's very critical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love just as a marketer, I have to chime in here on this. I love the visual, right? I love the pink flamingo. I love the Flock Cancer. What's that inspiration behind that? Just a little thing on that one.
Well, when I was throwing the parties for the Fun Barbara, I mean, I could Pinterest up, like Pinterest had just come out. I'm like, oh, I can theme the heck out of this. And I live on a really busy boulevard, so, the parties kind of started spilling out the front yard. And it was Franz Whitty.
Oh, yeah.
I used to also rent their flamingos because I'm like, oh, this is fun. There's something about Harrison Boulevard that I always kind of embrace the whimsy because people go, oh, are you the fancy stone lions? I'm like, no, I'm the pink flamingos. So there was a little bit of just kind of, a nod at the man. And so when I was creating my own organization, you get to do your own branding. Flock Cancer Idaho just had a kind of a dual message for me. And it gave me the opportunity in my own business card to give myself the title of mother flocker. Because if you ever get that opportunity,
That's
you take it.
hilarious.
Take it.
You
Yeah.
take it.
I love
So
it. I love
very
it.
unapologetic.
So funny.
I think it's I think it's visually great. I think everything about it is wonderful. So looking at your sticker right here, I want one for my water bottle.
I'll have to see if I have some. You know, some of the really great conversations that Carrie and I have had have been around like body positivity and body image, because that's so hard for survivors. And it also goes back to that guilt thing. You know, a lot of times we feel as survivors like, well, we should just be grateful to be here. But like you're faced with, you know, treatment does a lot of really unkind things to your body often. You know, radiation specifically, you know, changes, you know, how your skin is going to react or how your skin can be worked up. You have a reconstruction that is also can be a very unkind journey. And sometimes we just go, well, I'm supposed to just be happy I'm here.
Right.
And I don't get to ever, you know, as I mentioned before, we already have complex relationships with our bodies to layer all this on, you know, and I'm sure Carrie talks with a lot of those women as well.
No, absolutely. I think I like to start when I'm talking with people to really think about the culture we live in. There's a few different factors, and Leslie and I were talking about this. One is we live in this culture that really preaches the power of positive thinking. And I remember this from even like being young, that this was like the power of positive thinking. And I think it can be really challenging, exactly for the reasons that Leslie just talked about, is when somebody is talking about, say, the physical changes that they've gone through due to cancer. And there's, you know, there's temporary changes and then there's permanent changes. Hair loss, you mentioned earlier, your hair might come back, but it might come back differently. For example, a lot of people's hair grows in differently after chemotherapy treatment. And then there's permanent changes to the body that really act as a constant reminder of what you've been through and the trauma that you've been through. And oh, my train just left the station there. That's really funny. My thought. Oh, back to the positive. Coming back. Back to the positive thinking is, so if somebody says, you know, I am struggling to adjust to my breast reconstruction, right? It's just, it feels so different. I'm numb in that area. I have no feeling. And people will say, gosh, but you look great, or whatever. It really minimizes what the person's trying to talk about. They're not saying, I'm not grateful to be alive. I'm not grateful even that I had the ability to get reconstruction. They're saying I'm really adjusting to a profound bodily change.
And that comment that you just said, you know, oh, but you look so great.
Right.
I think people want to be supportive, but oftentimes as a survivor, we feel dismissed.
Absolutely.
And, you know, people want us to be okay. And like our kids need us to be okay, you know, and my mother needed me to be okay. And my husband at the time needed me to be, you know, strong enough to, you know, be a wife, and you have to be intimate and all these things. But when we don't feel okay, and people say, you know, you're fine, you look fine, you know, oh, it's in the past, you feel just kind of dismissed because, you know, mentally, emotionally, physically, you don't always feel like it's in the past.
Right.
What would you say is an alternative to that statement? That a family
like
member,
that happy, be positive.
Yeah. What is there one?
I would say when a cancer survivor, you know, wants to talk about their struggle or reveals any of those struggles, I think just really listening and saying, you know, I'm so sorry that happened. That must have been really hard for you. Instead of, you know, wanting to wish it away, you know, let them live in their discomfort. You don't have to try to, you know, wish it away for them, because sometimes, you know, we may just be in one of those moments where we do need to give it space. But, you know, just listening and to, you know, sit there with them is really helpful.
Yeah, and like maybe being curious, right? To say, oh my gosh, that sounds so hard. Like, tell me more, right? Being curious about what your loved one is experiencing rather than trying to make it all better. You know, I think that's the hope, is I can take this pain away by a positive you know, comment. And so I think from my angle in supporting individuals going through that is really listening and saying, gosh, that sounds minimizing. I'm sorry that happened. Let's really talk about it. Let's, you know, and if you can give voice to what you're feeling, you are releasing so much in that giving voice. And so I think that's where, for a lot of people, therapy and just that validation or even education about this is common. Like what you're saying is not unusual. And that's really comforting to people to hear that they're not alone, that nothing's wrong with them for having these emotions or this challenge in adjusting to their changed body.
Yeah. Well, and as we talked about before, grief is something that you don't fix grief or get over grief, or it's never rear view mirror. Sometimes it's minimized, and you're not living directly in it. And that's the same way as our survivorship. I'm not living in it every day, but people can't wish it away for me, and it's okay every once in a while, just like to let me step in it and kind of be there.
It.
Yeah,
just really feel it.
Yeah, because it would be like, I lost my dad when I was going through my cancer journey. Like, no amount of people wishing I didn't have grief is going to make grief go away, because he's still gone. Same thing. Like, survivorship doesn't end. I still had cancer. Right. It's okay sometimes.
And, I love, Grace, that you asked that question, because sometimes we don't know what to say and how to, and I think the blanket statement is like, oh, you look great, you must feel great,
Right.
And also kind of talking about how it's lonely, and people are kind of like, oh, you're doing great now, so I'm not really going to say anything. But it's okay for us to check in later, right? Hey, I know it's been a year or whatever. How are you feeling now? Have you, how's your diagnosis? Are you still getting treatment? Or, I think some people are scared to say something. They're like, oh, I don't want to bring it up. It's like, but it's there. It's never going to go away. So It's okay, right, to check in on your friends.
Yeah, and you could encourage them to do, survivorship, seek out survivorship groups like we have with the Flock Cancer community. There's a great group called Shades of Pink, and they do monthly activities, because sometimes, and, even doing the walk once a year, to be able to check in, just to give it space, I think is really healthy. But and I'll also go out there and say it's not for everyone. I meet a lot of women who are newly diagnosed, and they're like, it's not my thing. Not everybody wants to live pink forward. Sure. and revisit it. And that's okay too, because just like anybody's grief, it's very complex.
Journey,
absolutely.
Right? Just like everyone has their own journey, their own personalities, their own way of
processing
dealing
it.
with
Yeah,
processing
you bet.
it for sure.
You bet.
And Colby,
I'm glad you said that.
I think your question, made me think about that idea of, say it's a year, 2 years since somebody wrapped up their treatment. And I do think it's okay to ask, how are you doing? Maybe not at the wild, celebratory party for somebody's this or that, but you could say, hey, let's grab coffee, and, or figure out a time to, to really ask a friend or family member, how are you doing now? Now that you're looking back at it, what are you feeling and seeing? And I think
we're often on drug regimens for years,
True.
Like, the majority of us are on this drug regimen that can be really, really taxing and difficult for, close to 5 years after we finish, surgeries and the daily treatment.
And I know, seeing you, Leslie, we haven't seen each other for a while, but our history is we play tennis together. That's what we used to do together.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about how reasons why we don't really play tennis anymore. And then, you saying why you didn't play tennis because of, surgery that you've had.
Yeah.
And, to me, I never thought about that. I'm like, oh, she's probably back out there doing it, but things have changed in what you're saying, the new normal, right? But that was a part of your life. I know that's a huge part of your life. And that's got to be really tough to let go.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just part of one of those things that changes, and I miss it, but it would take a tremendous amount for me to, try to overcome and get that level of stamina. But, surgery changed my musculature, and I don't, my body doesn't perform the same. So, yeah, it's, another thing I had to kind of mourn.
Right.
It was a big part of me.
And you and I were talking about that idea of acceptance, or sometimes we even have to start with acknowledgement, right? Like, it can be hard to accept that something is permanently different in our lives, and that's why we have to grieve it. We have to mourn. But this idea of holding space when something is permanently changed, and figuring out who it is you want to process that with, or how you want to grieve something that, is permanently changed. Maybe you're never playing tennis again. Are there things that, I'd want to explore with somebody through my counseling are there things, it's not tennis, but that do bring you joy in a similar way, or make your body feel warm and relaxed in the same way? And so but you really are grieving to get to that point of acceptance of like, I'm never going to play tennis again.
Yeah.
And so, again, finding spaces and safe people and ways to grieve and move into a place of acceptance of what is.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Carrie, you described yourself as an oncologist social worker. Is that
Oncology, social, yes,
Perfect.
absolutely.
So, are you one of the only ones in the area that has this specialty? Is this a common thing?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, there are not, I would say, enough oncology trained social workers or mental health therapists in the community here. And, I think bigger cities, it can be different. But I don't know nationally that there really are as many as we need. So I would say in the Boise Treasure Valley, I'm one of maybe 10 or less individuals that specialize in oncology. And by that, what I mean is we as mental health professionals have worked in the hospital or oncology clinics. So in my experience, I was at the bedside meeting with individuals after breast cancer surgery, or they'd had their surgery with reconstruction and there was some complications. So they're back in the hospital. Or I've sat with clients in the chemotherapy infusion center and provided counseling to them while they're at that. So having that knowledge of how an oncology treatment center works, sitting with people as they're there and experiencing all the emotions that go with that, and then taking all that experience and opening a private therapy practice, I feel like those of us with that training do bring something really specialized, but also underserved here in our community. And so I think many of us are looking, how do we train more individuals that are interested in healthcare, social work, or healthcare, mental health, and then specifically oncology, to get the training. And I think there's a lot to getting that, like working in a healthcare system and getting that experience and even street credibility of like, I know that work and now I'm bringing it into private practice. And I think there's such a comfort to individuals that come to me because I'm like, oh yeah, I know that procedure, or I know tamoxifen, or anastrozole, the various medications that you're talking about, and have learned about those side effects over the years, or I know what comes with that type of surgery. And so it's a really good question, and there is a lot of need. And I think for that reason, communities like Flock Cancer, and then even support groups, which I'm looking more to design and stand up, are great because it just expands the reach of services of what's available to our community.
Well, and for that reason that we talked about, that those survivors feel very, very kind of dropped.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We mentioned earlier the nurse navigators. So when you're going through your treatment and your surgery and everything, you're assigned somebody, a hospitalist who helps you navigate like all the different treatments, all the different, and you feel like you have a person. And I remember when my nurse navigator broke up with me, she's like, well, I was in my car just crying because she was the only person who just kind of saw the 360 and was walking through it with me. And I truly felt untethered after that. So you're so right. Our community so needs those support groups. And I'm hoping you and I will make a great partnership.
Yes, we will.
Oh,
yes,
absolutely.
stand
I see
that
big
up.
things happening
Yes.
between you two.
Yes.
So you're talking about you have, your nurse and your group that you have, and then you were talking about when someone maybe wakes up from surgery. This was probably a stupid question, but I'm going to ask anyway.
Do it.
Do you, before you go into surgery, do you say, I want somebody there, I want a therapist there to talk to, or is that something that's already provided by the hospital? Do you know what I'm saying?
I do.
Do we have to know going in, okay, here's your options, we're going to have someone here for you to talk to afterwards, or do you have to be your own advocate and request it and seek it?
You often have to be your own advocate.
Absolutely.
And Leslie's completely nodding her head.
Yeah.
Some people seek out, and most health systems should, if they're providing oncology services, have dedicated oncology social work, services provided. So you can ask for that at initial diagnosis or as you're preparing for surgery through chemo. There's radiation dedicated social workers. And then some health systems have survivorship programs. So once you've transitioned off, but you're in the hospital, it's after surgery, whatever that is, or you've come back for a complication. Breast surgeries are you're often not
It
admitted
is
to the hospital.
not a
vastly,
linear process.
No, it's a vastly different world now. But you can I just want to highlight, you can request that support at any point.
Right.
And, at any point you can call even your oncologist's office and speak with their team members and say, yeah, I know I'm in a survivorship now and not seeing you so often, but I could use some support. So what's available? And they can walk you through that. If not, they're going to refer out to the community to somebody like me, and I can help as best I can.
Oh, we're so glad that there's resources like
Yes.
you available. Huge need in our community.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm glad that you ladies connected because
Yes, thank
seriously,
you.
Yes, so are we.
Like I said, I think that it's very powerful, right, to have what you two and your knowledge that you both have together. So, what do you say, going forward, thinking about, now that you guys have met and what's, what's to come and stuff, reflecting back on everything, what would you give, there's different steps. What would you give as advice for somebody that might have, this is a big one, being diagnosed?
I would definitely say to reach out to an organization like ours to try to connect with somebody who's recently diagnosed. I've done this, I've just dabbled in trying to think about this, but looking at my community, so many women in the survivorship community that I'm working with already saying, I want to give back. How do I help? How do I help the next woman coming along? Mm-hmm. And that gives us power because that helps us turn some of our pain into purpose. And so I try to, when somebody is newly diagnosed, find out about their life experience, their age, their diagnosis, and connect them with somebody the same thing. If somebody is 36 and being diagnosed, they don't want to be connected to my 82-year-old mother. It's like, but no.
Oh, she's fun.
Although she'll pour you a cocktail and kiss you on the lips. But maybe connect with another young mother that is going to be able to share similar stressors or circumstances in navigation, or connect with somebody who has the same type of diagnosis and wants to talk through some of the specific options. So, just reach out to the community, and we have so many people who truly have walked this walk and want to help the next woman so that they don't feel alone. Because right now, when they're diagnosed, they probably don't have anybody else in their immediate family that has had breast cancer. They have a lot of people who want to help but probably feel very helpless.
Yeah. I think I would add just everyone is unique too. And just to add on to what you were just saying, Leslie, is some people, they actually don't, they're private. And so they might want to do it slightly differently, right?
Yes.
And so really tapping into, yourself best. What is it that I need now that I'm, you are in a panic mode. So I don't want to discount that at diagnosis, but is helping people figure out, knowing who you are and you're unique, what is going to serve you best? Is it
for sure
letting a lot of people in your, your community know, or is it kind of keeping that closer to home? Is it just, your most immediate loved ones? And so that, I think, is a unique question. And absolutely, some people will benefit right out of the gates with that peer-to-peer support, or it could be once they're entering survivorship. And then others, they want to do it maybe differently. And then I've talked with people, they're years out from completing treatment, and now they're ready to connect with those services. So,
for sure.
Again, knowing yourself and you as a unique person, what do you need?
Right. It doesn't fit all the same people. Everyone is so different. Everyone's personalities, and cancer doesn't change that.
Right. Yes. Good point.
Right?
Yeah, well said.
So it's going to be just whatever that person may need.
Right.
So.
Well, and I loved what you said, Leslie, too, about how everyone's situation is different, and I assume everyone's cancer is different too, right?
For sure.
And so trying to pair them with someone who can make them feel as less alone as possible.
Yeah.
But I could imagine that it would be tricky because, everyone's treatment process is different and the prognosis is different, and probably pretty tricky to find someone who aligns just right.
We have a private online group, and somebody's like, we have this shorthand. Everybody has their diagnosis shorthand. They're like, hey, I'm ER/PR positive, HER2 negative, score this. has anybody had experience with Keytruda? Has anybody, did anybody have this? So we do a little bit of, kind of that technical sharing of, some experiences, and some of them are very logistic, but some of them are emotional. Sometimes it is just like, I'm feeling really alone, or, feeling like I need support with this, thoughts.
So, how can people get involved? How can we get involved with Flock Cancer?
Well, flockcanceridaho.org.
Idaho, sorry.
Yeah.
Flock Cancer Idaho.
Flockcanceridaho.org. You can find us online. We have an opportunity to take intake forms from anybody who's looking to get involved, and you can always come to our stroll, which is May 9th next year. It's always Mother's Day weekend. Corporate sponsorships, the community comes out. And we have a fall event which just passed, but we feel very strongly about advocating for screening and detection, early screening. We created the Flock Cancer Idaho Foundation to pay for women to get those detection appointments, and we partnered with Lyra Breast here normally. So anybody that needs assistance, resources, they can reach out to me at Leslie at flockcanceridaho.org.
So, kind of going back really quick, because you just made a comment about, with, the people, like, let's say you're 36, you're talking about someone 36 years old,
Yeah.
but you can't go until you're 40, right, to get your mammogram.
Right.
Is there a place on your site, or is there anywhere for younger people that can detect, or they know how to detect if they have breast cancer, or do self-exams? Since you can't get a mammogram really unless you have maybe history of it.
We would really, refer someone to the hospitalist and connect them with the care workers who we know in our space are really good for helping you advocate for the screening that you need, for sure.
Right. Okay. Just kind of took a step back there, but I was just thinking about, these younger people that also can't get mammograms, you need to check yourself out.
Absolutely.
So, and then Carrie, for you, how can people, be, more, advocates, either of their own, advocates of their own health, or when they think they need to step in and maybe, call a therapist, or, any kind of advice that you would have there?
Yeah, great question. I'll answer it a couple ways.
Yeah.
So I'll answer it maybe from the individual that has a new diagnosis or has gone through this, and then for mental health professionals in our community. So I'll start with, how about mental health professionals in our community? I am currently the Idaho State Representative for the Association of Oncology Social Work, which is, there are state representatives, obviously, every state across the nation, and we meet every other month. And what we're doing is getting updates both on the national scale, what is happening in terms of what we would call psychosocial oncology, so the psychological and then the social kind of components of oncology, and really advocating to expand the services that are available to our community members. So for any mental health professionals out there that are interested in learning more, you can email me. It's just carriepanzer@gmail.com, or my website, carriepanzer.com. You can message me through that. So I have a way of networking and getting updates to our community members through that initiative with AOSW. And I'm trying to remember the first part of your question. I think was it advocacy? If you're, is that what you were?
Yeah.
Was it advocacy around?
Yeah, just
screening
how
or getting services.
Just getting services, right?
Okay.
So you've already have found out, but we were talking about the importance of being your own advocate.
Absolutely.
Right, not just thinking they're going to tell me everything I need to know, and bringing the therapy into that when it's okay. We were talking a little bit to ask for your help.
Your help, right? And so again, if you are, you're newly diagnosed, wherever you are actually in the process, if you're feeling like you need support, you can ask your oncologist, or whether it's your, radiation oncologist, I need support. What does that look like? I need a referral to an oncology social worker. And so you can meet with that individual who's part of that team. And a lot of that work is strategizing around the advocacy piece. Like, how do I get all my questions answered? How do I prepare for these appointments that I have? Or it's, counseling through the impact of the individual and their family. And then some people might say, well, I want to see a therapist more regularly than the health system can provide. And so then they might be seeking a referral for a community-based therapist. And that is part of the role of the social worker at the oncology treatment center, is to help connect people to community resources. And beyond therapy, I mean, it could be financial support for transportation. If people are struggling budget-wise with, paying certain bills, there are foundations at our health systems. We have really generous
and those are
donors.
A lot of programs that we've tried to identify and that we support with our fundraising as well.
Yes, wonderful. So, because there are funds, I mean, there's tons of support out there. People just have to think to ask, how do I advocate, or how do I tap into these services? And that's a huge part of what an oncology social worker provides. Let's reduce as many barriers as we can to this experience in your care, so that we can reduce stress in whatever way we can.
And as we said, the healthcare system is so complex, but if you just went in, it's like, my back hurts, I have to go talk to somebody about my back. But when you're diagnosed with breast cancer, as I said early on in the program, you immediately have 5 doctors. You've got plastics for reconstruction, you have medical oncology, you have radiation oncology, you have a cancer surgeon who is only going to get the cancer out of your body from a surgical perspective. And that guy's oftentimes not talking to that guy. And then like a gynecological element as well, you may have to have a hysterectomy or an oophorectomy or something, so all of a sudden it's just this explosion of all these different resources. And you're dealing with the PTSD of your diagnosis, and you remember about 10% of any given conversation that you have with any of those professionals at any time.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. So if somebody was to donate to Flock Cancer Idaho.org, you said for resources, you have some of that funding go to some of these resources. Is that what a lot of the funding goes to?
Yeah, Flock Cancer Idaho, we don't have any paid staff. It's actually the majority of my board is all breast cancer survivors who just want to, leverage our voice to help the community. And so 100% of our funding goes back out into the community. A dollar that's raised is a dollar that stays here. Because we didn't want the stigma of, first of all, we have no overhead, but also we wanted to be really transparent. So the first programs that I supported were programs that had been near and dear to me, like the YMCA Oncology Recovery Program. And there's a program in Boise called Bustin' Out of Boise, which, they help women who are going through their treatment journey and help them with, transportation or childcare or house cleaning. And there's a few programs out in the rural communities, like Angel Wing Transport and Surviving Hearts Network. When you're doing radiation, you have to go every day. It's 5 days a week, often for like 6 to 8 weeks. Right. My mother did that from McCall.
Oh, wow.
And drove to Boise 3 times a week for 8 straight weeks. Wow. And so if you think about the price of gas, ladies, I mean, come on. So, they help with transportation or transportation costs. So we're trying to talk to all of these communities and say, what helped you? And if it isn't something that helped you, what help did you need? And
all that stuff you don't think about, transportation and having things easy for you, just don't think about that part of being part of your journey.
No, it's very expensive to experience cancer. I will give a plug to the other organizations like Expedition Inspiration.
Oh,
here in our
absolutely.
community.
Yeah, and Casting for Recovery.
Casting for Recovery.
Yes.
Both are devoted to breast cancer survivors. And it's really about...
And they help mental health as well.
It's a mental health
getting out and getting active.
Yeah, like reconnecting to your body, I would say, and beginning to say, like, that's right, I am strong. So Expedition Inspiration coordinates, like, large-scale hikes every year and gets women together, breast cancer survivors, and you're planning and training and making friends through that experience. Or Casting for Recovery is fly fishing. And so women come back from these retreats and say, I feel so strong. I forgot how strong I am and in my body. So, Flock Cancer is aware of these, organizations as well. And everybody's talking and supporting each other. And so they're in Boise and in Idaho. We do have a lot. There's a lot to tap into and a lot of community opportunities, which is really exciting.
So, and can people find those on either of your sites, or is that something that maybe?
Yeah, I list out all those resources
okay.
on my resource
Wonderful.
page. You know, a lot of
Okay.
these groups, not only that we support, but these resources to get involved. You know, and our goal is to support all of them with you know,
Sure.
our fundraising and our voice.
Well, we want to help support as well. We will have both of your websites on our resource page
Wonderful.
and
Great.
on our the mindful mic as well
Yeah.
on that page. 'Cause
Show
we
notes.
want definitely make sure that make sure that people have access to both of all the information you guys have. It so what you're doing is fantastic. You're making a difference, both of you, and we're both very excited that you came here today and share your story.
Thank you for the
Thank you.
opportunity.
Have.
It's been
Yeah.
really nice
Yeah.
to spend this time with you, with you all.
Thank you both so much. I think describing all of the resources that already exist within our community just provides so much hope to know that there really are so many people doing so many things that help in a bunch of different ways. So thank
Yeah.
you both.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you,
for having
ladies.
us.
We are so grateful to Leslie and Carrie for sharing their hearts and wisdom today. Their work reminds us that healing doesn't happen alone, it happens in community. To learn more about Flock Cancer Idaho, visit flockcanceridaho.org. You can connect with Carrie Panzer Epley and explore her therapy practice and embodiment work at carriepanzer.com. If you found this episode meaningful, please share it with someone who might need a reminder of hope and strength. And don't forget to follow The Mindful Mic on your favorite podcast platform for more stories that inspire healing, connection, and compassion. Thanks for listening. Until next time.